So what do you do when you look around and it seems like everything, like the world around you is broken? How do we remedy some of that brokenness? Today we're going to answer that question in the third week of our series, Ordinary Heroes. I can't wait. Let's jump in. All right, well, I am ready to go. I'm excited to jump into this message. First and foremost, let me say welcome to those of you that are with us here this morning in person. And of course, welcome to those of you who are gathering with us online this morning. And so as always, I'm just going to encourage you, if you're watching on social media, would you just hit that share button really quick? Again, it helps us get these messages out to as many folks as possible. And even if you're here in the room and you have an iPhone or a Droid or whatever all the new smartphones are called these days, just pull one out real quick and you can share that on your social media, share this message. That would be amazing. Thanks so much for doing that. As we get going, I guess I just want to say, man, we are in the third week of a series that I think is really important. Jimmy kind of hit on it earlier, but we're in a season right now in our country. Obviously, we have a new president-elect. There are a lot of things moving and happening, and I think it sort of leaves a lot of us wondering, like, okay, what does this mean for me? How am I supposed to function? Is there something that I can do? So that's been the idea behind this whole series. We're saying as ordinary people, what are the lives that we're supposed to live? What are the things that we're supposed to do? How are we supposed to bring about change or impact in the little things, right? And so we're saying, what does it look like for us to be extraordinarily heroic, even though we're just kind of normal folks, right? And so again, today we're in the third week of a series where we've been working through the book of Esther. And we've been getting to know some of these characters a little bit, but what we find in this story is these are normal people who God does extraordinary things with. So if you have a Bible, I want to encourage you, you can open up to Esther chapter 4. We're going to be in verses 10 through 17 here this morning, just 8 verses that we're camping out on. We'll get to that in a few minutes. I want to set the stage for those of you that maybe are tuned in for the first time ever this morning and you don't know the story of Esther, so I'm going to kind of catch you up. But let me be real specific about what kind of the big idea is this morning and the big takeaway. It's that we live in a broken world, right? And so we know, you go all the way back to Genesis 3, this story about Adam and Eve, and they take the bite of this forbidden fruit that God tells them not to, and it's from that point forward that the world is just sort of thrown off its axis. Everything is sort of spinning out of control, and you and I still exist in the wake of that. We live in a fallen and broken world. But what we've called this sermon today is something has to change. So what we recognize in the midst of worldwide, I'm not just talking about U.S., I'm talking about worldwide, we have like political unrest all over the place, we have injustice, racial injustice, ethnic injustice, all sorts of different hierarchies and lower hierarchies. We have all sorts of stuff like that. We have things that just aren't right. And so what I believe you and I are called to do as followers of Jesus is to acknowledge, hey, some things aren't right, and maybe I need to be a part of the change. Maybe I need to play a role in it. And so again, that's going to be the big takeaway here this morning. We'll get to that as we get going. So let me catch you up. Like I said, we're going to be in Esther chapter 4. Let me catch you up on, again, to make sure we're all on the same page as we jump into the story. But here's sort of like a 2.5 minute overview. Our story starts with a king. His name is Xerxes. Okay, now Xerxes is not a good guy, but he has a new queen, and her name is Esther. Now, Esther, again, is kind of the hero of the story, or one of them. I mean, God is the hero of the story, but she's sort of one of the good guys, I guess you'd say. And Esther is a good Jewish young woman, but she does not come from some sort of background of royalty or privilege. As a matter of fact, she's just a little orphan girl. Her parents died when she was a kid. She was raised by her cousin Mordecai. Now, Mordecai, just like Esther, is a good Jewish person. He loves the Lord. He wants to serve the Lord. He wants to do right by people. But again, Mordecai, his job is he just stands out and he sort of guards the front gate of the palace there in Persia. Now, this is not a position that gives him the king's ear. He doesn't have all this influence or any sort of, he's just a normal guy who just kind of stands out and does his job pretty low on the totem pole. And so we have Esther, who has somehow become the queen of Persia. We have Mordecai, her cousin, who raised her, who just sort of has this entry-level type job guarding the front gate of the palace. And then in Esther 3, we're introduced to our adversary. We're introduced to the bad guy, this guy named Haman. Now, Haman in Esther 3 is given the position by the king of prime minister. Now, here's what this means. This means that he is now officially number 2 in command of the entire kingdom. Now, he doesn't have any authority that's not given to him by the king, but as you might imagine, number 2 in the kingdom does give you, some power. And so when he gets this promotion, the king says to him, hey, Haman, this is cool. You have this new powerful position. How about we do this? Just you go walk through the streets, and people are going to be ordered to just bow down and sort of celebrate you and give their respects. And so Haman he's feeling himself. He's like, all right, here we go. And he starts walking through the streets. The king gave him a fancy new wardrobe, whatever. And as he's walking through the streets, people are bowing down. Oh, praise you, Haman, whatever. We celebrate you, Haman. And then he gets to Mordecai, again, Esther's cousin. He gets to Mordecai, who's just standing at the gate doing his job. And Mordecai won't bow down. Now, historians will point to a few different reasons that this could be. It doesn't maybe necessarily matter that much, but I just thought I would point them out. The first could be that like other Old Testament stories, other Old Testament characters, Mordecai's just devout in his faith, and he says, I don't bow down to anyone other than God, right? That could be why. Other historians will point to this, that Haman was known to walk around with a pagan idol around his neck, like on his chest. And so it could be, similarly, Mordecai's just saying, I can't bow down to you if you've got that thing on your neck. Are you crazy? No way. Or maybe it's simply this. Mordecai knows, man, I've heard stuff about this Haman. He's not a good guy. I've had a couple run-ins with him. He's kind of icky. I don't want to mess with this dude. And so maybe he just says, I don't think you deserve it. Whatever the reason is, Haman loses it. He is not cool with Mordecai, and so he tells Mordecai, hey, listen, buddy, not only am I going to kill you, but you're Jewish, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I've got the ear's king. Or the king's ear. I don't know if you know this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to the king, and I'm going to tell him, we're just going to kill all you guys. We're going to kill all the Jews. We don't even want you here anyways. Like, we just inherited you when we took over the empire. Like, we're just going to do this thing. And so Haman goes to the king. And again, let's understand, the king, he's just kind of in his own world a little bit. He's drinking a lot of wine. He's just kind of doing it. Like, he's not really that concerned with all the politics of stuff. And so you almost get this picture, like he's just like, yeah, whatever. Haman comes to him and he starts to sort of manipulate him a little bit. Like, king, I don't know if you know this, but these Jews out in our kingdom, again, when we took over for the Babylonians, when we wiped the Babylonians out, they had brought the Jews over. We didn't want the Jews, so I don't even know really what we're doing with these guys. Do we really need them? And if they keep growing in number, they're just going to become more pesky to deal with. I think, king, we should just do away with them. I think we should just kill all the Jews. And again, the king is just kind of like, okay, whatever. What do I need to sign? And that day, the king signs an edict that cannot be taken back. This is how edicts worked in the Persian Empire. The king himself could not go back on an edict that he signs. So he signs this edict that on such and such date, genocide will occur, and this entire people group within the Persian Empire will be taken out. Mordecai, again, catches word about this, and he goes to his cousin Esther, the new queen, who might be a little over her head. And he says, Esther, you got to do something about this. And this is where we find ourselves this morning. In Esther chapter 4, let's jump in. We're going to be in verses 10 through 17. So Mordecai and Esther are they're writing letters back and forth, okay? So Esther has a scribe because, again, she's a queen, so she has someone that's kind of writing the letters for her. Again, Mordecai's come to her and he said, you got to do something, Esther. Maybe you could talk to the king, right? And so here's how she responds. It says, then she instructed him, meaning her sort of scribe there. She instructed him, her scribe, to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and all the people of royal provinces know that from any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent this back to her. So hold on one second before we go any further. So Mordecai tells Esther, he says, listen, we got to do something about this. Haman's off his rocker and the king doesn't really care. A lot of people are going to die, Esther. And so here's her response. She says, wait a second. I don't know about this, Mordecai. Listen, you know how it is. You know how the king is, and you just think that I'm going to go in there, this new queen. I don't come from royal descent. What power do I have? I'm just some orphan girl. And you think I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to be like, hey, king, here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to do. Here's how you need to run your politics. Here's how you need to run your kingdom. Are you crazy? I cannot do this. And she sort of gives these excuses. She's like, it's been 30 days since the king has even summoned me. And if to get into the inner court, you have to be brought in by the king. And if I don't just maneuver through all these laws just the right way, he's gonna have me killed. He exiled the last one because she didn't come dance for him. So again, you can see the nerves that Esther's walking in, and then here's how Mordecai responds back. He writes her a letter. He says, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. It's kind of a punch to the gut, right? He's kind of like, hey, you think just because you're in this higher position, Esther, now that you're the queen, that you're going to be fine, and the rest of us you're just going to leave the rest of us to die? He says, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. I think this is Mordecai's way of saying, God's going to do what God's going to do. We're his people. He's going to take care of us. But Esther, you have a chance to do the right thing. So he says, but you and your father's family will perish. He says, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. So here's what Mordecai says to Esther. He says, couldn't it be that you were put in this position? Again, we've said this throughout the series. This is the only book in the Bible where God is never mentioned. Not one time is God mentioned. But in these 8 verses, we see all sorts of spiritual undertones, overtones all over the place. You could see their faith. You could see their reliance on God. And here's what Mordecai says. He says, Esther, you're Jewish. The king doesn't know it yet, but it's going to come out. And how do you think it's going to go down? When all these people are slain, when our people are taken out, you think he's going to spare you? No. But Mordecai even shows his faith. He's like, God's going to bring someone up to the surface to do the right thing here. But Esther, what if it's you? What if God put you in this position for this moment? So as you might imagine, Esther's feeling all sorts of things. She's feeling a conviction, maybe feeling a little bit like, what was I thinking? I gotta do the right thing for the people. Like she's got all this stuff going through her head. So here's how she responds. It says, then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. She says, go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. Again, here's what we see before we go any further in the story. Esther's like, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to put my life on the line, if I'm going to go before this crazy Xerxes husband of mine, I got to make sure I'm right with God. We need to ask as a people, we need to ask for his blessing in this scenario. And so she says to Mordecai, she says, you just go back and you tell the Jews, you tell them just to fast for 3 days. We're just going to ask for God's blessing in the midst of our submission and our fasting. And I'm going to fast, and I'm going to have all my attendants here in the palace that work with me. They're going to fast, and we're just going to ask for God's blessing. This shows Esther is like, She's a little nervous. But here's what we also see. She says this. She says, but if I die, I die. If I die, at least I'm going down doing the right thing. Which I think is powerful. And so the question, again, has to be asked, and it's this. Because, again, we titled this sermon today, something needs to change. Something has to change. We live in a world with brokenness. We live in a world where everything is sort of out of sync. We live in a world where, again, I think the cop-out for us is, I'm not a politician. I didn't just get elected president. I'm not a movie star. I don't have a lot of followers on Instagram. I'm not, some athlete with a bunch of influence. Who am I? How am I supposed to do anything about the fact that the world is sort of broken and messed up? And what am I supposed to do? So this is the question that I think we're all asking, right? It's like, what do you do when everything around you is broken? Because I'm just ordinary. And here's why I love this story with Esther. Yes, at this point she's the queen, but there is a moment where she's just an orphan girl, and she's new in this role, and she is overwhelmed, and she's looking around. She's saying, the last queen before me got exiled because she wouldn't come dance in front of the king and all his creepy friends. So I'm supposed to go and I'm supposed to say, hey, king, I think you're doing your politics wrong. I think you got the wrong leaders around you. I think you're kind of listening to the wrong people. Hey, king, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't have signed that edict. Hey, king, you're going to kill a bunch of innocent people, men, women, children. So Esther's asking this question, like, what do I do when everything around me is broken? Everything around you and I, there's so much around us that if we just open our eyes for a second, which we don't always want to do, but if we just open our eyes for a second, we begin to recognize there's a lot of hurt. There's a lack of equality and equity. There's a lot of us that are just trying to figure out how to maneuver through a broken world. And here's what's so important for us as believers to understand is you and I are called to be the remedy. I think what we do too often is we sort of put ourselves in this little bubble and we say, I'm comfortable here. And we think that our faith is like this thing where we tune in online for a little bit. We get up and we come to church and this is good. But Jesus says, you're my hands and feet. You, church, are my primary means in breaking through the brokenness of this world. So don't limit it. Don't make it an hour on Sunday morning. It's got to be more. And so here's the big question again that I wanted us to tackle. What do we do when everything around us is broken? So I'm just going to throw a few things at us that I think will help us to walk this out, to not cop out and say that's what the movie stars do, that's what the big social media influencers do. What can I do to remedy some of the brokenness? And here's the key word. What do you do? What do you do? Okay, so I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes. We're just going to talk about you. Here we go. If you're the type that takes notes, this might be good stuff to write down. Here's the first thing. You ready? Here it is. Grow your character. Grow your character. Now, I've been in enough therapy sessions in my life that I've recognized my propensity at times to say, the situation would have turned out a lot different if they didn't. The situation would be a lot better if those people. And what do they always say in therapy? What do they always say in these situations? They say, all you can do is control you, right? And so we're talking about you this morning. How can you be a compelling force in your community? How can you be a compelling force in the world around you? Let's start here. Grow your character. Here's what we find with Esther, is that she surrounds herself with people who seem to make her better. Primarily, let's go back to Mordecai, the guy who raises her. She leans on him, she looks to him for instruction, she looks to him for help, and he's willing to offer it. See, there are 5 principles I stumbled across this week in some of my research I want to share with you. These are ways, if you're sitting here and you're saying, well, how can I grow my character? What am I supposed to do? Well, how am I, that's kind of there's a reason that I am the way I am. And you're right, yes. You were molded and shaped because you're raised in a certain household who said certain things to you and who molded you in certain ways. But there are also, don't let that limit you, okay? There are things that you can do to continue to improve yourself and grow yourself in your character and who you are going forward. Right? So let's start with the easy one that we talked about a lot, and it's this: spend time around others with good character. So as I've said many, many times in the past, if you want to see what kind of person you're going to be 3 to 5 years from now, look at the 3 to 5 people that you spend the most time with right now. And if as you're looking around, you're like, oh, these are my girls, and this is like, and they're just like every Friday night, it's just like throwing bottles back, and they're just having parties, and it's like, maybe that's where this is going. Who do you spend time around? Who are the people that are influencing you? And would you say that they're people with good character? In 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul says, bad company corrupts good character. It's a simple concept. But the people around us affect our spirits. They affect who we are and who we're becoming. Again, Mordecai was someone who invested in Esther, and she allowed him to mold her and shape her in a positive way. Let's keep going. You want to grow your character? Consider doing this. Clean out the trash. Now, I'm not trying to sound like some prude. I'm not saying that you should only, watch Disney-rated G movies with your kids and that's it, okay? But I will say this. Sometimes we can get a little loose with the stuff that we're consuming in our lives. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I love true crime podcasts and documentaries and stuff. I love it. Anyone with me on that? You could just listen to that stuff forever. I could too. I just finished. I binged this one called "Son of a Hitman." It's really cool. But I get into that stuff. Okay, but here's the problem: if I'm just constantly consuming it, I'll notice I'll go into the grocery store and I'll start to case the joint a little bit, right? Because the things that we consume, they do sort of mold us and shape us a little bit. And so sometimes, every now and then, man, we just gotta clean the trash out. Now again, I'm not saying you have to be a prude, that's not what I'm saying, but you gotta ask yourself, am I just constantly, the only things that are coming into my soul is stuff that has no redeeming quality whatsoever? Here's the third thing. You wanna grow your character? Fix problems quickly. Now again, I'm not a mechanic, but here's one thing that I do know. I do know what it sounds like when my brake pads are starting to go, need to be changed. Most of us know that sound, right? It's just that little squeal, right? It's just that little tiny squeal. And if you change them, especially if you know how to do that yourself, it's what, 20, 30 bucks? I don't know, buy new brake pads, take it into if you don't know how to do it, you take it to the place, they'll do it for maybe 250, 300 bucks, right? But here's the deal. If you just keep putting it off, which I've done before. I'll get to it. Now it's not the brake pads anymore, right? Now it's the rotors. Now it's I don't know, 700 bucks. And you just keep putting it off, and all of a sudden it's a big deal. You want to grow your character? There are certain things, just certain little squeals that your brake pads do in your life, certain little lights that hit the dash of your life. That you can keep putting it off, but eventually it's gonna start to warp your character a little bit. But if you get to it quickly, if you fix the problems quickly, this is a great way to grow your character. Just 2 more things really quick. And I wanted to spend the most time on this because I think this is the hardest one, maybe the biggest one. Here's the 4th thing, is make regular deposits. Here's what I mean. Sometimes we gotta clean out the trash. And then here's a great thing, is sometimes then we have to make regular deposits of good things in our lives. So I'll go through seasons where I'll be like, you know what, I just need like good deposits, right? And so in the morning when I'm getting my kids ready for school or I'm packing lunches or doing that, whatever, I'll just listen to like scripture just on audio. And it'll just be sort of playing in the background, speaking into me, right? I talk to people that will listen to worship music on their drive to work, right? Like it's just this way that they have like regular deposits that are wholesome, good, and uplift the soul and can kind of mold their character a little bit. Are there books that you're reading? Are there podcasts that you're listening to that aren't true crime podcasts that uplift you and are molding you and shaping your character in positive ways? Make regular deposits. And then lastly, this, stretch yourself and let God stretch you. Don't stay put. Allow God to put you in uncomfortable situations that are for his glory, but they're growing your character. They're growing your character. Stretch yourself. Don't just stay right here. Take a step, which we'll talk about more in just a second. If you want to know how, just you, again, we're not talking about starting some big nonprofit. We're not talking about getting 500,000 people to sign a petition. We're talking about just an ordinary person wanting to make a difference in the world around them because God has called you as a member of the church to be his hands and feet. Let's start with growing our character. Now let me keep going. Here's the second thing. Grow your character. Ask God to break your heart. Now this doesn't sound fun because we don't like to have our hearts broken. So more specifically, ask God to break your heart for what breaks his. Now for Esther, this was pretty easy. Because what was breaking her heart was the fact that her entire people group was about to be eliminated. And so Esther could say, we got to do something about this. And you could even make the argument that it took a little prodding from Mordecai. Like, remember, Esther, you're not safe just up there in your palace. You know, you got to take a step of faith here. But eventually, Mordecai brings the conviction that she needs, and she's like, I have to do something about this. And her heart is broken at the thought of her not acting. So again, here's what we do so often is we just, as I just said, we feel safe in our bubbles. We feel okay right here. We don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't want to think about there being injustice in the world. We don't want to think about there being things that would require me to not feel happy. And so I think a lot of times we just do this thing where we just sort of, we shield our eyes from the brokenness. We shield our eyes from the pain in the world. I don't want to address it. As you're growing in your character, the next thing I think we have to do is we have to ask God to break our heart for the things that break his heart. And this is a scary thing to pray because I know that he's going to show it to us. And it's going to burst that bubble for so many of us. For Esther, it was easy. For you, I don't know what that might be. But if you'd be so bold, I think God will show it to you. As a matter of fact, I know God will show it to you, which leads to the third thing. It's really simple. Then we got to get involved. So we're growing our character. We're saying, God, I'm really scared to say this, but would you break my heart for the things that break your heart? And then this is what we do, okay? So the first two things are a little bit, growing your character. It's not easy, but it's like, okay, I can press into this. I can do my best. I'll make this step, right? And so we'll do that. And then we start praying this really scary thing. Some of us will take this step. God, break my heart for what breaks yours. God, break my heart for what breaks yours. And then he's like, okay, here you go. And then we're like, oh man, my heart is actually broken, right? And then here's this one. This is one where we're like, I don't know. We'll do the first thing. We'll do the second thing. But then it's this third one where we're kind of like, I don't know. And it's kind of like this. I was having a conversation with my friend, one of my best friends this past week. His name's Seth. He's been one of my best friends since I was like a teenager. We've known each other forever, and we just have one of those relationships where we could call each other on our stuff. And I was having kind of one of those weeks where I was being a little introspective, and we were talking. He was basically giving me free therapy, is what he was doing. And I said to Seth, I said, man, you know, I think I just really suck at empathy. And Seth goes, yeah, dude, you suck at that. He's a little nicer about it because he loves me, but basically he's like, yeah, you're not great. And I was like, you know what, man? I think I'm really confrontational, aren't I? Am I really confrontational? And he was like, yeah, dude, yes, you suck. You do suck at that. He's like, you're always picking fights with people. Like, why are you doing that? And again, here's why I say this, and here's what I know to be true, is if you've ever done therapy, you know this. If you've ever had a really honest friend who'll call you out on your shortcomings and challenge you to be better, here's what you know. You can get to a place where you begin to acknowledge, where you can almost you don't even need a therapist anymore to point out your blind spots. You can get to this place where you recognize, man, this is a weakness. This is a flaw. This is the thing that I have. But here's the hard part. Doing the work to try to heal and get better at those things. And that's what's so crazy. In my life, I'll be like, man, I'm not great at empathy. I can see, man, why am I being so confrontational over here? For me, sometimes it's that hard part of taking that step of actually doing the work to be better. Here's why I say this. I think we do the same thing when it comes to Jesus. Jesus says, man, I want to use you to make a difference in the world. I want to use you to change the world. I want to use you to change your community. There's so much injustice. There's so much hardship. There's so much pain. There's so much suffering. There's so much inequality. There's so much stuff that you, as my hands and feet, the hands and feet of me, of Jesus, I want to use you. And so I'm watching you say, I want to grow my character. I'm watching you say, I'm going to surround myself with good people. I'm going to be a person who's cleaning out the trash. I'm going to be a person who's depositing the right stuff. I'm going to be the person who's saying, Jesus, I want you to grow me and grow me. I'm watching you do that. I watch you pray. I hear your prayers. Jesus, change my heart. Give me a heart and let it break for what breaks you. I see you do this. I see it. And you'll do the first thing and you'll do the second thing. And then I break your heart for what breaks mine. And all you have to do is take that step to now do it, and you don't do it. And here's what I love about Esther's story. What does she say at the end of that section of scripture? She says this, if I die, I die. But she puts Mordecai in action. She says, tell them to fast because we got to go to God and make sure that we're right. I'm going to be fasting. And she steps into, and we'll get to the rest of the story next week and the week after, but she gets involved. Now, here's the thing. Almost every single week, what I try to do is I try to give a clear next step for you guys. And usually it's so go to hub.firstchristian.com. But here's what I can't do. I can't really do it that specifically this week because there are a lot of opportunities for us to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And God has maybe wired you with certain passions. Or maybe you've been through certain things in your life that have ignited a certain passion that doesn't hit someone else in the same way. And so I can't really put out a blanket statement here for you, but here's what I could say. I could just say, don't cop out. Don't do the thing that we do in the church. We say, but I'm really comfortable here. I just feel really good here. I got this little bubble, and I go to church on Sundays, and it's fine. And I'm cozy. The primary means. Let me say it. The means for breaking through darkness is light. Jesus is that light. You and I are the hands and feet of Jesus. And so I'm going to dare you pray that prayer, Jesus, break my heart for what breaks yours. But where he leads you, where he guides you in that, I'm going to dare you to step into it. Like Esther did. Even when she was scared, she stepped into it. See, I said this many years ago in a sermon, and I'll say it again to wrap up. Here's why I just wanted to focus on you this morning. Not the collective, but just you. The things you can do to be a compelling force of good in the world. Here's why. Because I don't believe we can be collectively what we're supposed to be if you aren't what you're supposed to be individually. We'll get to the collective stuff. But are you growing your character? Are you praying scary prayers? Jesus, break my heart for what breaks yours. And are you stepping into the invitation that he extends, because he's going to extend it? It starts with you. Father, we are humbled at your methods, because sometimes we just we look around and we say, me? But God, for whatever reason, that's how you want to work. You want to use us. So God, break our heart for what breaks yours. God, just do that in us. Show us things that aren't right. Show us darkness that light can penetrate. And then God, my prayer is that individually we will take steps of faith to penetrate that darkness. Grow our character. Help us to look more like your son, Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this time was an encouragement to you. If at any point during this video you thought, I think I want to know more about Jesus, or I want to take a next step in my faith, we would love to connect with you over at hub.firstchristian.com.